Hi and welcome back to another issue of Sprue Talk. Today I'm joined by David, who is the co-director of Lancaster, and Trevor, who's the producer, or one of the producers of Lancaster, the new feature documentary film. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Thank you. Great
Thanks
to be
so
here.
much for coming in. Yeah, we've been working with you guys for a couple of weeks now, and some of you may have seen, the posts on social media. And then we've got this video coming out and a number of specials as well. And Trevor, you've told us that you've done a special little video for us. So that'll be out and about.
Today.
Yeah,
An exclusive for you today. A short trailer.
So I guess thank you. And we shall start off by those viewers that don't know anything about Lancaster and perhaps have never watched Spitfire either, which is one of your films.
Shame on them for not. Really.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description for both
Shocking.
films. But tell us about Lancaster first.
Well, Lancaster was the natural successor to Spitfire, and we had the idea. We were filming up at RAF Coningsby at the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, and I remember walking with my co-director and Palmer into the hangar, and there were all these beautiful Spitfires and Hurricanes, and of course we were making the film about the Spitfire, and then standing at the end of the hangar with this absolutely enormous and awesome aeroplane, and I mean awesome in the true, Old Testament meaning of the word, because it just stood above everything else, and it just said, "I am a bomber." And I said to Anne, "That is the next film," and here we are.
So you decided that was the next film before you'd even released Spitfire?
Before we'd even finished the film, yeah.
Well, that leads to some more questions. But I guess, Trevor, you was involved in Spitfire?
I was involved in Spitfire. I mean, what David's not saying is that was 5 years ago.
Wow.
It's a 5-year gestation period for this film.
The Lancaster, you've been working
For
on
Lancaster, yeah,
yeah.
because of the overlap of the two films. We barely finished Spitfire when Lancaster came along, but that's 5 years ago.
And you're both, we've been chatting now for the last hour or so, and you're both really into aviation and
Yes.
history. So
Yes.
I mean, both of these films must be
Yes.
an absolute passion. But, it's not a job, is it? It's
No,
something else.
Well, my standard joke is it beats working for a living. Of course, it's actually really hard work, as Trev just said. 5 years, and Spitfire took 5 years as well.
Wow.
I mean, and this is just, it's not sort of we'll do something every now and again. It's pretty full-on work, in between other bits and pieces as well. Like earning a living. But no, so they're passion projects, but. This is one of the things that Trevor and I share, is this absolute lifetime's involvement in aviation as fans of flying machines, as fans of military history, and it's just amazing where this interest brings you, and it's like coming here today to Airfix is such a thrill, I have to say.
It's a bit special.
It's
special.
It has been fantastic showing you around
Yeah.
this morning. And Trevor, I know you are a massive Airfix enthusiast.
I am.
Even to this day. So
I am.
how do you think Airfix has shaped your life?
It absolutely has. This is the place. I brought some kits along, because I guess one of the things we're talking about, everyone talks about what was the first kit you bought.
Yeah.
Or what was bought? You didn't buy them. What was the first kit you built? I suppose this actually I bought relatively recently, but because it's such a collector's piece, that's the earliest Airfix Lanc I've ever seen, and that's in my collection. Because building is a different thing. Collecting, it's a bit like the trainers you don't wear that you collect, that the kids do. But with kits, it's collecting. That's the oldest Lanc I've found. The classic Lanc is the Cheer for George. Can I step away without entirely ruining the film?
Yeah, just
Okay.
This is a true one I prepared
Oh,
earlier.
okay.
yeah,
Here we go.
it's
John
okay.
Lanc special. Yeah, two things. That's the Cheer for George, the classic Lanc. That's the Lanc I grew up with. Sorry, the Airfix Lanc I grew up with. But the kit that I built, if not first, then most often, was this little fella, which was the Lightning, and I must have built 12 of those. And I loved the plane so much. Whenever I got my pocket money, I would buy an Airfix Lightning and build it. time after time and never become bored with the notion. I think I'll build a Lightning on Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, so I think we should delve into boxes. We should talk about what's in boxes.
Should we talk about that in a minute? Yeah.
Because it's the iconography of the elements within those boxes. Is so important to me.
And do you think Airfix shaped your career?
Still does.
In terms of sort of where you went after school and what you did there, and you know.
Well, blimey, it has actually.
In terms of being creative.
In a lot of different ways, because Airfix, I'm not from a military family in any shape or form, but Airfix and flying became part of my life, and therefore my support of the Normandy veterans, for example, and now latterly the Bomber Command veterans and the construction of the Bomber Command Memorial, probably came from Airfix.
Yeah.
Whether it's the daring do or the sheer heroism or the excitement of it, I don't know. As I say, we weren't military, but it's led me to, I guess, from building these to then actually meeting the guys who flew them.
Have you met? I've met.
It's an extraordinary thing. You know?
Yeah, I once met. Absolutely privileged to meet a chap. I think he was a gunner on G for George.
Wow.
We was in Imperial War Museum in London doing an event there, and this old boy sort of said to me, "Oh, that's my Lancaster."
Wow.
I went, "Oh, you bought one as a kid or whatever?" And he went,
Yeah.
No, I flew in that one."
Oh, that's fantastic.
And that was just an amazing feeling, just to go, "Oh, hang on a minute, who am I in the presence of right now?"
Yeah.
Because you started you took your head up and just went, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is something
special." And they're
special.
still shaped. I mean, those guys are shaped by what happened to them in such a small period of their lives. You know? Whether it's D-Day, those 12 hours or 24 hours shaped the rest of their lives. And likewise, when you meet Johnny Johnson, and he's still burning with this passion about that time, and that's 8 decades ago.
Yeah.
And that short period is their life. It's incredible.
Also, I mean, what's worth remembering is they didn't fly for the whole duration of the war. They flew 30 operations. And if they survived those 30 operations, they went and did something far more dangerous, which is teach other people how to fly. And that was when an awful lot of them got killed, flying rather clapped out old aircraft. And then they went on another tour of ops. But some of them might have only flown 30 operations, but those 30 operations, as Trev just said, shaped their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's some audio on YouTube actually of, I think there's BBC audio chap in the back of a Lancaster. You must have heard it, and they're doing a.
You need to watch our film.
Yeah, well,
you're giving a spoiler alert here.
Oh, am I? Oh, okay. Well, let's go back to the film then, because I know we can talk about Airfix all day.
No,
which is great.
They overlap.
So the film, we'll put a trailer up right now.
You knew you were facing death, night after night after night, but it's just the thing you accepted. The Lancaster's a pilot's aeroplane, responsive but very powerful.
There's no question about it. It transformed Bomber Command.
Just imagine a sky full of fireworks. They hammered hell out of us.
The aircraft went down in flames. Boom. Gone.
And then there was nothing left.
Morale was very low indeed because the losses were building up.
We lost over 40 aircraft in one night.
I was so devastated. I wasn't able to say goodbye, darling.
Empty chairs at empty tables. That's where John used to sit. That's where Harry used to sit.
I'm sorry to see them go.
The hard facts are we had a job to do, and we had to get on with it.
There was water everywhere. It was just like an inland sea.
The Lancaster was the best of its day.
I feel bloody lucky that we survived.
The whole thing was about teamwork. I didn't know it at the time, but I was joining the best crew in the Air Force.
When I look at the Lancaster, I have to tell myself, did I really fly one of those airplanes?
And now we're back. the trailer is really emotive, really powerful, and I just wondered how you found working on such an emotive project.
Well, having done Spitfire, I mean, let's just wind back a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So when we did Spitfire, the intention was always to make the airplane the vehicle by which we tell the people's stories. That was the kind of concept, if you like. Unlike the gazillion other DVD films or documentaries about the Spitfire, which people have said, "Oh, I've seen them all. I've seen them all." We wanted to make something different. And you think, well, how do you make something different in a kind of marketplace where it's been there've been countless films about the Spitfire? So it was that concentration on the people really, and through the people, you then tell the story of the airplane. But when we look back at that 5 years it took to make Spitfire, and it seemed a struggle at the time. When it came to telling the story of this aeroplane and the crews who flew this aeroplane and what this aeroplane represented, suddenly we had a whole new challenge, because Spitfire suddenly became really simple. Oh, it's about the defence of freedom. That's what Spitfire is about. Yeah. Lancaster is about a much more challenging subject, which is how do you win a war? And that involves uncomfortable choices. And the Lancaster was the supreme Allied heavy bomber of the Second World War, if you exclude the B-29 Superfortress, which of course never flew in Europe. And bombing back in the days of World War II was not a thing about accuracy. Sometimes they couldn't even find the city they were trying to bomb, let alone the factory in the city. There were all sorts of challenges. But the crews rose to those challenges. And what we wanted to do in the film was tell the story of how those crews rose to those challenges and the dilemmas that they were faced with. There are still controversies today about the bombing campaign and about what the Lancaster represents. So for us, the challenge was how to tell those veteran stories and get across the sense of the history and get across the context. The context is the key thing, because it's very easy to look at the bombing of Dresden and say, why did they bomb that city so close to the end of the war? Well, of course, in February 1945, they didn't know the war was going to end in May. Yeah. It might have ended the following December. If they hadn't have bombed Dresden, maybe the German, industrial military complex could have produced more gun sights for tanks or radar systems or whatever they made in those factories that existed in Dresden. So the challenge for us to make Lancaster was how to get the moral story across, and still be faithful to those veterans and not point our fingers at them, which is what had been done ever since the end of the war.
Well, up until really 10 years ago, which is when they unveiled
which is the memorial.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point. And it comes through with, even if you look at the two posters for the two films, it's very telling that recently, at the screening recently, someone said to me, that wasn't a film about Lancaster, it was a film about those who flew Lancaster, which is really telling, and so we originally saw Spitfire as I've said before, a machine with a soul. It's an extraordinarily beautiful, balletic machine with a soul. Lancaster is a machine with 7 souls, and that's important because there's that team, there's that crew of people who live and die together, live for each other, and they're randomly thrown together like some sort of game show. They're randomly put together, and yet their lives depend on one another. Yeah. And the moral ambiguity of war imposed upon those 19-year-olds, and I was going to say choices they made, but they didn't have any choice. They didn't have a choice in the matter, and they went and did that. And that's why when you look at the poster for Spitfire, it is a cloud which resembles a Spitfire, and the beauty of that. Yeah. It's part of the nation, if you like. And Lancaster, the crew comes first and the plane second. Yeah. And it's telling for me in that way, because that's how our film has evolved actually in the telling. It's their voices need to be heard. This is the first and last time some of these guys are going to speak about what happened to them, and so this is their legacy.
And I believe talking to Jeremy, some of the guys that you had the sort of privilege of filming, have since passed in the last 5 years
Half
as well.
of them.
Yeah, we interviewed 38 veterans, or 37 aircrew veterans to be correct or precise. And yeah, half of them have passed since. When we interviewed them, the youngest was 95 and the oldest was 100. And that was 3 years ago we interviewed most of them.
Wow.
So they're all average age now, 98, 99. I mean, it's staggering, as Trev just said. You know, for some of them had told their stories before. Some of them had been interviewed before, or written books. But some of them had never spoken about it. One particular chap, Peter Kelsey, had never ever spoken about it, apart from to close relatives and what have you. And I,
and yet they come over as if he comes over as possibly the star of the film.
Yeah.
You think he must have told these stories forever, but he hasn't. He's just now saying it. But they speak so eloquently. I don't know what I did yesterday afternoon. And they can vividly remember what they did on a March afternoon 80 years ago.
You can understand why it's stamped in their memories,
Completely,
can't
yeah.
you? Yeah. I mean, those the way it's shot, the fact that that the crew are now the old boys, if I can say that, are sat there and they're talking about their experiences, but at the same time they are pouring their heart and soul into trying to explain those experiences.
Coming to terms with what, because now we have phrases for it, now we have treatment for it, now we have an industry looking after it.
Whereas then,
the situation.
You didn't talk about it.
You didn't talk about it, and you were worse than that, rejected. Unlike the fighter pilots, rejected after the Second World War and neglected and forgotten.
Yeah.
There's a great phrase which veterans use, which is forgotten but not gone. We can reverse that. We're going to make sure these guys are remembered.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, this really is our opportunity to give them their opportunity, to give to tell their story for the last time. And so it's amazing privilege to tell these stories, and an incredible platform to put it on. The cinema, to make a proper documentary for the cinema is a very satisfying thing, because it's not like telly. It's you're really trying to craft a narrative, and they tell the story. There is commentary in the film, but the commentary connects you. Yeah. It doesn't tell you what to think. They tell you what they thought.
So
and
the voices of the film are of the people.
Absolutely.
And it's a range of voices as well. They're not all speaking with the same voice by any means. They don't all have the same opinion about what they went through, or about the morality of it, or the rights and wrongs of it. And some are firm in their belief and they know what they believe. Others are ambiguous. Others are still troubled, and there's a spectrum of opinion and views of how it's affected them to this day. Very different. They're not united in their beliefs.
Well, they never had the same press coverage that the glamorous Spitfire and the few had at the time.
They did for a while, and it's interesting that that Churchill was more than happy to claim responsibility for Dam Busters and the banner headline success of Dam Busters, because I'm Churchill, I'm behind that. Okay, accepted. And then Dresden comes along, and Churchill, I wasn't actually behind Dresden, but I'm not in charge. That's the RAF thing. But you were in charge of the dams.
Yeah.
Oh well, I kind of was.
Yeah, and that has a huge impact on the morale of those serving and those lost, of course, is
after the
all
war.
Their friends.
Yeah, after the war.
Yeah.
They were hung out to dry.
One of the veterans in the film says that when he wore his tin hat, we all loved him. When he put his bowler hat on, he was a different man. And what he meant by that is the difference between the wartime leader and the politician.
Yeah.
And they will all tell you that all the veterans will tell you that they fought for king and country. They don't believe in politicians. Politicians are here today, gone tomorrow. And when I take the old boys to Normandy, they hate the current Prime Minister of the day turning up, and the current French President turning up, and the American President turning up. They have no time for them at all. Hanging out, current politicians hanging out with 100-year-old veterans. They can see through that nonsense. They don't like that. But Prince Charles turns up and they're cool.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's not trying to be a politician.
No, he's not.
So, in the film, I'll ask both of you this question. Is there a particular story? Is there a particular moment in the film?
We don't want to give away the ending, but...
No. We won. Yeah. But is there a particular story or moment of the film or during filming that really sticks with you? I imagine there's loads, but is there one?
Well, there's so many. I mean, the challenge was how to, 37 veteran interviews and one German civilian she was a child in Dresden. So those are what we had to choose from, and from that we actually worked this out. We had 53 hours of interview material to get into 90 minutes. So there's a lot to choose from.
I'll give you a Lancaster one. Given that we've spoken a lot about the veterans, and we probably should speak about I'll give you a Lancaster moment for me on the shoot when we were at Coningsby. We'd sent off BBMF Lanc, went to Derwent Dams.
Mm-hmm.
Every geek and twitcher and plane spotter in the land knew it had gone there, by the way, because they were all texting me going, "Oh, we know what you're up to. We know you're making a film. We've seen chase planes with the Lanc." They knew what was happening. So it went up to Derwent. And then we sat there at the airfield while our plane went on its mission to the dams. And there was something weirdly kind of, I call it received nostalgia about that off they went to the dams, and we sat around having coffee, nervously waiting for word of how the mission was going, And I thought, I'm going to get my camera ready, because when this plane comes back, I'm going to capture that moment of its returning, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And I missed it, which is really, again, very telling. I'm standing around at the hangar, and suddenly someone said, "They're here," and you turn round. And as David described it, a mighty Lancaster, looms over the hangar and he's back. Didn't have time to photograph it, but I got one of those. I got and it was that they're back.
Yeah.
And that was that weird kind of, multiply that by 1 million, and that's what it would have felt like when they come back.
Yeah.
Or 5 of them don't.
I imagine
or 92 of them don't.
It's crazy, and I think that's I know that's mentioned in the trailer that we would have just shown. And one of the quotes on your press release is, I think it was, of the 55,000 young men who died over Nazi-occupied Europe, half of them were Bomber Command. Or half of them.
No, 55,000 who were killed is half of all the aircrew, Bomber Command aircrew. So you had a 50% chance. That's of being killed. Yeah. Not just being injured or taken prisoner.
They lost more on one raid than were lost by the RAF in the Battle of Britain.
By fighter command, yeah.
By fighter command, in one raid.
Yeah.
The volume, the sheer number of losses.
Which compounds that feeling that you had when you was, when you sent the Lancaster, the BBMF Lancaster off.
But isn't that weird? You're just weird. You're worried about it. It's peacetime England, and it's flying to Derwent Dam where there's loads of tourists, and yet I'm worried that our boys haven't come back.
Yeah,
it's a really strange feeling, and then it does, and it's very emotive when that thing comes back.
I'm going to answer the question as well, because I've been thinking whilst Trevor was talking about favourite bits of interviews, and there's so many, and a lot of them are in the film, but there were some that, in fact, this one is in the film, but of course it was a longer story because we had to condense it. And in fact, it involved not a Lancaster, a Wellington bomber. David Fraser was a rear gunner in a Wellington bomber, and he was 98 when we interviewed him, lived on his own, walked without a stick, very, very independent kind of character. And he became a rear gunner because he wanted to get into the war. He didn't want the 2 years of training to become a pilot. It was only 8 weeks training for a rear gunner. So he signed up to the RAF. And so he flew quite early on, and in May 1941 was in a Wellington bomber over Hamburg. They were trying to bomb Hamburg docks, and they were hit by flak. And the aircraft caught fire, and his gun turret caught fire. So he was trying to put it out, called on the intercom. The pilot sent the navigator down to help him put the fire out. And as he came down, they were attacked by a night fighter at the same time. And David tried to engage the night fighter. His hydraulics had all gone in his turret, and he couldn't engage it. And he said, "I just was so frustrated because he couldn't do his job. He couldn't protect the aircraft and his crewmates." And so the aircraft, it was raked by fire by the night fighter, and the pilot gave the order to bail out. So he came back. He managed to. Two of his crew members were injured quite seriously. He managed to get them out of the front hatch. All the time the aeroplane's in a dive, got them out of the front hatch, and then eventually managed to bail out himself. Landed in a field on marshland. All these cows came round, surrounded him, and so he had the wind completely knocked out of him, and so he started walking, and came to these buildings, and this door opens, and as he memorably says in the film, this voice says "Halt!" and they were searchlight crews. So they took him in, they cleaned him up. They sent him to the officers' mess. They gave him brandy and coffee, and they said, "Don't worry, the war will soon be over, and Hitler will march up to Buckingham Palace and take your surrender." And he and his fellow crewmates said, "Wait and see." And the Germans thought this was hilarious, this wait and see. And eventually they got shipped off. And as they were about to leave, the Germans all came out and said, "Wait and see, wait and see." They thought it was so funny. And then, of course, 2 years later, or even a year later, along comes the Lanc.
Yeah.
And that was it. Different game all of a sudden. It wasn't so much, cricket or whatever the German equivalent of cricket is. It was a serious business because that aeroplane took the war.
I'll give you one more moment talking about the German reaction, which, as David has mentioned earlier, this woman who was a girl lived near Dresden, Ursula, and just one phrase that she uses, where she hears the Lancasters come in a 1,000-bomber raid to bomb Dresden. She knows, with her dad, she sees that they're going to bomb Dresden, and she just says, "We could hear them coming to bomb our town. Lancaster bombers at night." And it's a deathly phrase, Lancaster bombers at night.
Yeah.
And we've all been brought up on this, not brought up, but we all know the legend of the sound of Heinkel's coming towards Britain and all that. But no one's ever told it that way around for me. And to actually hear someone say Lancaster bombers at night, it's such a simple phrase, but it's so loaded.
My grandmother always talks about, well, not always, but has spoken about, hearing the bombers go towards London and that because the
the sheer
German
volume
bombers
of planes
had a particular sound and everything. And I guess unless you lived near the airfields in Lincoln, where most of the Lancasters and bombers took off, you'd never really hear that because they take off from Lincoln and they go straight across the channel.
Of course, they're going in a direction.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that is interesting to get that
It's
perspective.
really chilling.
But the other thing, she was another extraordinary interviewee and interviewed her. And again, she'd never been interviewed or spoken about it before. I mean, apart from to her family members. And she was back there. She absolutely was back there. And she talked about the sounds that Trev just mentioned of those engines vibrating on the windows.
Yes.
And she said that was terrifying.
Yeah, I bet.
Quite incredible.
Is there any, whilst making the film, was there anything that was particularly difficult? I know you guys worked with
COVID.
Yeah.
And Brexit.
There was this
COVID and Brexit.
There was this pandemic thing that they launched.
Got in the way.
Launched on us to try and stop us. And Brexit, they kind of launched both at the same time to stop us.
Yeah. Do you guys work with BBMF and a number of very well-known aerial photographers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we formed a relationship with BBMF because of Spitfire. Now, of course, you have to remember that BBMF probably get 1 or 2 inquiries every day of the week, every year, year in, year out. And so they don't know who's going to make a good film and who's not. So they were slightly reserved, when we contacted them about Spitfire. And in fact, we never did any air-to-air filming with them, with Spitfire, but we did film at Coningsby for 2 days. But they loved Spitfire because it was different. And so when we contacted them, when we said we wanted to come back for Lancaster, the door was open instead of being closed. And they were unbelievably helpful. They wanted to set stuff up for us. There's a real challenge about filming the Lanc during a normal air show season because it's, you can only do so many hours on the airframe every year and they're pretty much fully booked. So that was going to be a real challenge. And then when COVID came along, there weren't many silver linings to COVID, but there was one for us, and that was that machine was not flying.
No air shows.
That's right, there were no air shows. And John Dibbs, he did the aerial photography in Spitfire, we wanted him to do it again. Now, of course, COVID stopped him from coming over for quite a long time, but eventually we were able to get him to come over. He quarantined, and then he talked to BBMF, and they still needed to train their crews to fly the aeroplane, though it wasn't flying displays. So they said, well, we've got to do a navigational exercise. How about you film that? And we said, yeah, okay. So they gave us 2 flights in one day. One was this one that Trevor's already described, where they went off to the dam. And so we pace around like expectant fathers back at base, whilst Dibsy goes off in the helicopter to the dams, and they get some amazing shots of the dams, including the opening shot of the film. And then they flew out over the clouds, and we got some incredible sort of cloud surfing type shots. And then they flew out over the coast. So we got 3 shoots in one, which as filmmakers is amazing, because the thing you want is variety. You don't want one 3-hour shoot that just gets you one great shot. You want,
and it's worth highlighting Dibsy. Dibsy is the world's greatest aviation photographer.
He's based in the US, isn't he?
He is, and he's supreme. And so that's one of the major elements that made Spitfire so special for us, to have Dibsy flying with that plane. But of course, with Lanc, there isn't any air-to-air, really. Even archive footage. Lanc flew at night. They had a lot of work to do. They didn't really spend much time filming each other flying air-to-air in a Lanc. Again, very different job. And also, given that there's only 2 flying Lancs in the world, there still isn't much air-to-air of the Lanc. So if you put the world's best aviation photographer with the only flying Lanc in Europe, you know you're going to get something special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to be able to get what I think was 3 or 4 setups in the one day was riches beyond.
Yeah.
So we actually have that footage, which at some point, when our Lanc is silhouetted against the sea, it almost looks CGI. It almost looks. You can see every rivet on the plane.
I know that's in the
trailer. It looks
trailer.
like a model,
Yeah, that's in the trailer.
Believe you me, it's the real Lanc.
I know that's.
I think we need to put a disclaimer at the front of the film that says, by the way, there are no models here. This is a real Lancaster.
That's one of the weird challenges about it, actually, is that the air-to-air photography is so good.
Yeah.
It does look like CGI.
Especially the nighttime stuff. It doesn't look real.
I mean, we shot it during the day, of course, because they won't fly it at night for obvious reasons. Not any, they used to, but not anymore. So we had to grade it in the grading suite, which is where we make all the pictures look beautiful. But the challenge was, right, how, this extended back to the planning for the shoot. So we said to Dibsy, right, we want it to look. There's an old film technique called day for night, where you shoot, you don't see the sun, you tend to shoot towards the light and what have you. And what that gives you when you drop the light levels down is this moonlit style effect, and that's exactly the shot that you saw in the trailer there, with that backlight and the reflection coming off the wings, and it gives you this extraordinary appearance of looking like nighttime when you drop the colours and everything.
And there's even that incident in the film where they never trusted the Met men, never trusted the weathermen when they're going on a mission. The weatherman would turn up, they'd all laugh and go, "Really? What's the weather going to be like tonight then, boss?" And they would say in the one mission, "Don't worry, there's going to be no moon tonight. You're going to be absolutely fine. There's no moon, so that's great. You can sneak in there." They get airborne, full moon. So it's just like a floodlight on the plane,
and that's what shadows even on the ground as they're flying across.
Yeah, that's right.
That is unreal. We've spoken today about before we started filming about some of your models on your hobby today.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if we bring it to that really. I was amazed. We've not spoken before today, and then you turn up from reception with a couple of boxes and a bag full of goodies, and it was a joy to see. So explain what you brought in today.
Right, I will. Well, this is me coming out as a full-on nerd, everybody.
A closet modeler.
But much like Trev, it was my upbringing was shaped. So I suppose when you think about it, I was born in '62, 18 years after the end of the war, and so we were surrounded in a way by war or by, if you like, almost nostalgia for the war. Certainly, my grandmother, much like yours, loved the war. It was the best time of her life. She was a fire watcher, and would endlessly tell me stories about it. But anyway, so I just grew up with this whole thing of model making, and I loved, I had this G for George kit. I had the Halifax, because my granddad worked in a Halifax factory, in London. So I was brought up with it, but I loved making model kits. And so, I bought a few things. I rummaged around in my parents' loft. And I found these old Airfix catalogues, so 15p, and you look at the range. I mean, we just had a look round at the presses, the old Airfix presses here in the factory, and there's so many. So Trev, you mentioned the Blom and Voss.
Oh yes,
it's in here,
it's
all
a
right.
flying engine.
It is, yeah. Here we are, the 124th Stuka and what have you. So these must date from about 73, 74. I had the Mustang, the 124th Mustang. So it was nice to find those again and reconnect them. And then I found. So this was a Spitfire that I made, and I kind of converted it.
Did you clip them wings yourself?
I did with a pair of scissors.
Whoa, yes!
But it's a Mark 9, which I don't think ever had clip wings. But there you go. And also it should be graham green. But anyway, and then I was really into the weathering. So here you can see all the silver paint, which shows up all the this is the wear and tear that the aeroplanes had. Anyway, so that was and I used to play in combat with these things with my friends.
You said that was the last surviving Airfix kit you could find in your parents'.
In one piece, yeah. The rest of them have suffered from, there was a Heinkel 111 that I think the nose broke off, etc., etc. So this is about the only one that's still intact. And then over recent years, I've managed to do something that I've always wanted to do, and I think one of the things that making Airfix kits taught me as a child was patience. But I never had the skill set, if you like, to take it any further than making a kit. But in recent years, much to my wife's irritation, I have found another way to make model aeroplanes, and it's something I've always wanted to do, and it's based on. I have a book here. This is a book called Aircraft of the Fighting Powers, and they were published during the war, and they produced one every year. And what it does, it was for enthusiasts and model makers even back in the day. And so, for instance, luckily I can open it at the Lancaster page here, and alongside all the details of the airplane was a plan. So you could trace this onto a piece of wood and make the airplane. And I thought, do you know what, I'd really like to have a go at that. And so I started, and I brought some of the results along with me. So I'll bring the first one that I did.
It's a Horsa.
Yeah,
it's a Horsa.
A Horsa glider. And I had an uncle who flew Horsa gliders.
Wow.
He flew on D-Day, but unfortunately the tow rope snapped and they landed in Basingstoke, not Normandy.
That's a result.
Yeah, it was a result, I think. And the challenge was, right, how do you make the tricycle undercarriage balance? So of course the nose is packed full of lead, and the hand painted invasion stripes. That was a nice challenge. But it was.
So is that wood?
It's wood, yeah.
Brilliant.
It's and it's made out of lime wood, and
You see that, modelers? Everyone watching, you see that? What's important about that? Roughly mop painted
Hand painted
invasion stripes. Don't put your masking tape on that. They didn't have masking tape on the wings, did they?
No, just
In 44.
get some stripes on it quick.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
So, and also the reason I chose the Horsa, it doesn't have any engines. It was easy to make. And then this shows the basic form of how you go about making the thing. So this wood is called lime wood, and it's a hard wood, but it's very fine. Well, it might even be a soft wood. I can't remember. Anyway, but it's very fine grained and easy to carve. And so this is a Halifax in the early stages of being made. Here's the wings will go on go that way around, I think. And so that's how you go about doing it. And so you attach the wings with a couple of nails and the tailplane and what have you. But you can see the basic shape of it with the rear turret and the cockpit and everything taking shape there. And then I started. And so here's one I prepared earlier, viewers. So this is the Lanc, which I made because we were making the film, and I thought, well, I'll do that. I mean, they take months of, grabbed free time in the shed when I could dodge some
Lovely
of the house.
Perspex.
Well, you see, that's how they used to do them back in the day.
That's quite right.
And it saved me carving
That's quite
thousands
right.
of propellers.
No blades.
But the funny little thing about this is these the decals on the wings there are because I made thousands of Airfix kits, and in my parents' loft I found all the decals that I hadn't used, and so these are from a 45-year-old Halifax model, which you've got a box over there, Trev. So Airfix transfers are very well made and have lasted for a very long time. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the Lanc, and then there's a couple more. So I thought I'd make the enemy. So this is a Junkers 88 night fighter with the Schrager Music upward firing cannon.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. They would sneak in like this, and then the upward firing cannon.
Corkscrew.
Too late. And the SN2 radar array on the front. So that was quite fun to make, and only the 2 engines on that one, so it was a bit easier. There you go.
Yeah. Move the table because the big one's coming along next.
And then this was just a different kind of challenge to make in a way. So this is a Liberator Mark 1 in Coastal Command colours. The thing that I didn't really appreciate until I made it was how extraordinary that wing shape is. It's called the Davis wing, and it's
very slim, isn't it?
really slim. And so this is one of the things about model making, which is amazing, is that it gives you an appreciation of the engineering that goes and thought that goes into making a real aeroplane, and so it's just so slender.
Yeah.
And you know, the B-24, as the Americans called it, the Liberator as we called it. I mean, they had an extraordinarily long range. I mean, they stuffed them full of fuel, but they could fly out across the Atlantic, and they closed what was called the air gap, which was the bit in the middle that the U-boats operated in. And the more of these they got, the more they put the pressure on the U-boats, and the more that they allowed the Battle of the Atlantic to be won. So one of our producers, Gareth, on the film, his granddad flew as a navigator in one of these. So
Wow.
I thought about that when I made it. Anyway,
One thing I always find really interesting and cool to do is laying 72nd scale aircraft next to each other.
Yeah.
Or just the same scale next to each other, because you really start to get a sense of size.
You
and
see
can
that.
start
You see
to-
that at Telford when they're all laid out. You think, I didn't realise that Phantom is so big.
The scale model,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
When
yeah.
you see them laid against each other for scale.
Because that
Especially
wing
top
there
wing.
is twice the sort of the Lancaster is
Yeah.
twice the depth, if you like,
that's right, yeah.
of that. So
yeah. But then the Lanca carried 10 tons of bombs, and this couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, there's reasons why.
Don't get me started on the B-17.
I know. Well, the Mosquito could carry a bigger
As much as a
bomb load.
B-17,
That's
yeah,
right,
yeah.
to Berlin. So the airplanes were designed for different things in different ways. You know,
Yeah.
so it's all very informative, I think, model making, and it's been very nostalgic coming here, remembering the model making thing. But it's also I find it very relaxing as well to make these things. So you know, model making serves any number of functions.
not only is it as a hobby, you know, in your using your mind, your hands to create something, but you start to learn so much about the history of the aircraft or subject matter, and then the engineering around it. Just, you know, as you talking about the wings there and why they were so different shape. A couple of weeks ago, we started to lay out plans for, just like you've got in the book there you showed us, for key Second World War bomber aircraft. Not in any particular scale. They were all the same scale, these plans, and you know how the width of the bombers compared. And I was amazed that the wingspan didn't really change. The length of the bomber did, but the wingspan always stayed the same. And we sort of go, well, why is that? Well, it's most probably governed by the size of the hangars. So the hangars
Yeah, of course.
doors
yeah.
are this width.
Of course.
You know, that's the uniform thing across the UK. So therefore, if you're going to build a brand new bomber, it can't be any wider than that, unless we have to start building new hangars everywhere, which they're not going to do. So.
That's true. I mean, there's a kind of yes, it's almost like an urban myth about, you know, the third British bomber, which is the Stirling. And the Stirling was the first of the 4-engine bombers to enter service, and it was absolutely enormous. I mean, you know, it was longer than a Lanc, and it also sat very high off the ground with its undercarriage. And so, but before it went into service, or in fact before they finished manufacture, had to shorten the wingspan, and part of that was to do with lift, and but the urban myth is that it was that the Air Ministry ordered it to be shortened so it fit inside the hangars. Now, it's actually not true, that story, which is a shame because it's a great story. But the reality is that the shortening of that wingspan crippled the Stirling's performance. And in fact, we have veterans in the film who flew Stirlings, and they would go over a target at 12,000 feet, and the Lancs would be at 22,000 feet. And if their timing wasn't right, if there was a stronger headwind than they expected, they would arrive over the target just as the Lancs were opening their bomb doors. So flying in a Stirling was not a posting you wanted to Stirling Squadron, because it was much more dangerous, and consequently their losses were much higher to flak, to night fighters, and to effectively friendly fire.
Yeah, bloody hell. You mentioned walking around the warehouse here today, and you arrived about 15-20 minutes earlier before Trevor, so you've got a bit of a sneak peek of the racks of tools here. But Trevor, we just left you and started to really.
I was Howard Carter today. That was Tutankhamun's tomb that you took me to. Let's unseal that, and to see those metal boxes was just incredible, because I'm taken aback by what I've seen today, because I talk about nostalgia. This is a nostalgia fest for me. I'm so fascinated by the elements of the kit. I haven't brought any built kits. I deliberately wanted to talk about the elements within the box, the unboxing thing. And in terms of books, my equivalent would be the Observer's Book of Planes. So, I always grew up on the little Observer's Book of Planes.
I bet you had the poster on the wall as well, the silhouettes.
Just the silhouettes were everything. But I mean, let's look inside the box, because the elements here are so important to me. Can I be 29? I'm sorry. Even when you had one of these, you would always look at the others as well. These are adverts. These are little ads that make you say, "Oh, I want a Sunderland. Can I have a Sunderland?" But I don't really fancy that. But I want a Sunderland. They're actually ads.
Yep.
For the next plane, Belvedere. I want a Belvedere. I want a flying Belvedere. Come on. So, the first thing that strikes you is it's moulded in black. And when did that ever happen again? So, a Vulcan would be moulded in white, and now everything is in this generic grey. Every manufacturer is grey.
The majority of our stuff is in grey, but our starter sets.
But that just made sense to me.
Yeah,
for it to be in black.
Our starter sets are now moulded in the base colours of the actual subject. So our Hawk Red Arrow starter set is moulded in red.
It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense to do that. Yeah.
The Tiger tank is moulded in a sand desert colour, Sherman in green. So we tried to do that for that market, because building is half of it.
Yeah.
Painting is the other half, if you want to be really simple.
And again, that's a memory, as David just hinted at. The saucer of water. Mm-hmm. I must have spent a decade with saucers of water with these things floating, and they would always crease, and you put them on and they'd stick to your thumb, and it was a nightmare.
Phone up Airfix spares.
But yeah, because I don't think we've even got in this box. Maybe I've got it in the lightning box, but. Fill those rivets.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, I know our designers, they get to so far with the design of our new product, and they go, right, we need to add the rivets now.
Yeah.
I think they found a clever way of doing it, where they can sort of just draw a line of rivets instead of literally one by one.
Yeah. But you see, this was the key to it. When you'd ruined the decals and you'd got something wrong, or you'd stuck glue to the canopy was the other usual one. Yeah. Was this.
Yeah.
Now, I always wanted to do, the Johnny Cash song, One Piece at a Time, where he smuggles a car out of the factory one piece at a time.
We do have people trying.
Yeah. In my childhood, you collect these and try and get a Lancaster or a Spitfire one piece at a time. This is such a beautiful, nostalgic thing, just that little sheet that you could send to get a missing piece. It was never missing. You'd knackered a piece. You'd ruin the canopy, or you'd got the decals right. That was just lovely.
So People still send these in, and even though I think there's a London address on there.
That's London.
Yeah, they do eventually. Well, sometimes they find their way here, which is I find is fascinating.
Yeah,
It's someone asking for a spare part of a kit that hasn't been made for 30 years. But
and then the other element, for me, Airfix is as much about these two things as anything else. That's symptomatic of Airfix. Getting that and getting this, because this, I was so self-important that I would never ever use these.
it's the clear stand.
The clear stand. I would always figure that that's what kids did. So when I was 9, I would look at this thing and I would throw it away because I thought, no, mine's a real flying lightning. It doesn't have a bloody stand. So this is for kids and toys. And I used to self-importantly mock these things, collect them randomly. Buy one of these every Saturday, but collect these. And then the other element on the Decals was always the name of the plane.
Yep,
There it
we
is.
still do that now.
Name of the plane. And you think, wait, and apparently that was supposed to go on there. I'm not sure. So I would used to stick this on my bedroom door. So the little sticker that said English Electric Lightning or whatever the kit was, I would take that out of the saucer of water and stick that on the door. A bit like the markings on the side of a fighter or a bomber of missions.
Yeah.
Different missions. So the amount of, and after a while I realised I built 12 Lightnings. It's fascinating. You can see the kits that you built. But these, it's so iconic. These different elements that make it up.
Did you always model your kits with wheels down and pilots in them, or were
pilots? You see, you've mentioned the pilots.
It
was a big moral dilemma of my childhood was to pilot or not pilot, and I think you're hostage to fortune if you put the pilot in, because you're hostage to reality, because you've got to make the pilot look realistic, and I didn't have the skills to make the pilot. Was there even a pilot in here? Let's have a look. The bomb dome made a difference. Once you'd got a white helmet, I don't think there is.
You have to send the form in for one.
I don't know how simple one. Oh no, I tell you what. No, there's certainly there's a seat. Yeah. I would not do pilot. I didn't like that. I think it felt more realistic to me to not have pilot, because akin with the stand, the pilot's gone for a cup of tea.
There's
lightning.
There's a nice little connection actually between the film and the Airfix pilot.
Yeah.
Because in the film we have a couple of sequences of animation done in a kind of wartime style. So it's old 4x3 style format rather than the widescreen, and they've been done by a chap called Andy Jones, who's a really talented animator and another massive aviation enthusiast. And we wanted to show the crew positions in the Lancaster. And so the symbol that he used to show where people sat in the Lancaster was the classic Airfix pilot. Or maybe it was another make. I don't know.
I was going to say, you said that to me earlier, and I thought, well, there's just some royalties here. But
and interestingly, because obviously in our film we have this, but multiplied by 7. And here, how many crew have we got in this?
2, 3.
And how many's in the current 72, 72nd?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my
should
head.
know this kind of
I know
stuff,
I know I should. I'm sure loads of viewers now will be shouting at their TVs. But,
and I did want to put out a challenge to viewers, which was to take one of these, to take an original vintage, as I would call it, 72nd Lanc, and a current Airfix 72nd Lanc, and see if you can combine the two, like build half a fuselage of current kit, half a fuselage of what year would that be issued?
I don't know, it's not a vintage classic kit, so I can't even look at the top of the box and see when it was released. But I couldn't.
Given that they're 1/72nd, it should work. So that's my challenge to
which is
watching.
Which is amazing.
A grey, sophisticated, chock full of interior, modern 72nd against that. A grey wing, a black wing, and see if you can combine the two kits in a hybrid. Don't paint it, but combine the hybrid two kits.
We expect to see that at Telford Scale
Please
Model World.
Yeah, do that.
This
do
year.
that at Telford.
That'd be great. Bring it
I'll
along
be there,
to our stand.
That'd be great.
We're proudly displaying.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point that you just raised there about the painting, because I think because that kit was moulded in black, it was kind of also designed for kids who were never going to paint it. You just wanted to build it.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a friend called Nick, and we each had a Lancaster, and we would fly ops with our unpainted Lancasters flying in formation across the living room floor to destroy some target next to the sofa, and then at some stage, and I don't know when it happened, we started painting them, and then sort of next level stuff was you started painting the interior.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And I suppose probably by about the age of 11 or 12, I was starting to paint the kit. But it slowed the whole process down because you were meant to do it in a certain way. You had the sprue, and you paint all the bits before you even took it off the sprue. And in a way,
that's a bit like Marmite as well.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
But also the very notion of, when you go to Telford and you see that someone has created the interior of a fuselage and painted it to the straps and the buttons and the danglers, and then lock the fuselage. But knowing that what they've done, back to Tutankhamun's tomb again, but knowing that they did it, but you can't see it now.
But that's
within
that's,
that.
But
That's
you know.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
You've done
created
it.
an interior that you've achieved, and then you've sealed it for eternity. It's just brilliant. It's so brilliant.
The Wellington, the new tooled Wellington kit, in the instructions of that, it says in certain stages, you're not going to see this when it's closed up. So if you don't want to, because otherwise we will get some phone calls and emails saying,
but
why
that's
have I
the
bothered?
evolution, isn't it? That's the evolution of the kits, really. It's the interior that's changed. Like the engines now. Well, the engines within that kit, we haven't looked at that one yet, but the engines within that kit compared with the engines of a current 172nd Lanc, it could bloody fly, the current one, you know what I mean? It would fire up the Merlin.
Well, of course, the new tool, last year, we released the, was it the B2 or the B3, with the radial engines.
Right, yeah,
the
that's
Lancaster
the B2,
as well.
yeah.
So whenever we're designing new kits, we're always looking at what other versions we can get out of it. And I've brought in the
That's pretty much the engine.
B1s here, but the Dambuster version on
the B3.
Yeah,
pretty much a couple of Merlins. There you go. Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you saw, but our April Fool's this year was that we're going to design and produce a 24 scale Lancaster.
I'd heard that you were doing that, actually.
And you've seen the designs today, if we continue the joke on.
I have seen today evidence of
124 scale Lancaster.
Scale Lancaster.
You've seen a Merlin, 24 scale Merlin sat there.
Hey, they found another element, look.
I don't remember them being supplied with glue.
No, this is...
That must be early 60s.
In these days.
Yeah.
But imagine trying to build with that now.
Well, that would only get you halfway through the kit.
That's a nightmare. Well, that's a disaster way to happen, isn't it? Cut the lid off that and you're in trouble. Look at that.
I know that you're in a race against time then to finish the model, aren't you?
What I always find amazing about the early kits, and actually up until Hornby acquired Airfix, is that all of the design of the products was done on a drawing board. So it's only since Airfix has been here at Hornby that design of products have been done by CAD, computer-aided design. So
it's the modern era.
Yeah. So when Trevor's saying, match this up with brand new computer-aided design CAD model, I'm sat there going, I don't know if.
But what I'm saying is, if it's 1/72, there can't be much difference.
No. And we still use
a couple of millimetres here and there.
Exactly. Bit of filler.
Yeah.
We still use original drawings. And one of the designers was telling me a story that...
I hope you don't use these.
No, not those, but the actual manufacturer's drawings. And apparently when they did the original, or even now 124 scale Harrier, the GR1, and they phoned up Hawker Siddeley and said... I think it's Hawker Siddeley, and said, we're interested in doing GR1 Harrier. Would you be interested in helping us? And they went, yeah, sure. We'll send you some drawings down. Brilliant. They sent the drawings, and they were one-to-one drawings. So they rolled them out on the floor, and they were sort of as long as the office, as long as a Harrier. And they were like, what are we going to do with these? But of course, then they were using drawing boards.
Because I've never understood why sometimes you get a model, and it's wrong. And all the modelers come out and say, hang on, the nose wheel of that Albatross is just wrong. And you think, well, how can it be wrong if you're taking it from a plan drawing, as David was doing in the book? You take it from a plan drawing, presumably. You don't just... Or do you just walk up and take a photograph at Fairhead?
Well, some people
hope
do.
to build a model from
Yeah,
it.
so some people do. Or they could be looking at books that are wrong, so they think the book is right. Maybe we've got it wrong. Maybe that we've researched an aircraft that is a bit of a hybrid that no one's ever told us. That even the museum that owns the aircraft now doesn't even know that after that was taken out of service, they bolted this on, and because everyone that has ever written a book about that aircraft has gone to that very aircraft in that museum, and what they've put in their book is now gospel.
Yeah.
So we do find that. It's not to say that we get everything right. We sadly we don't. We are getting much better at that. But I remember with the 48 scale Sea Vixen, which you mentioned earlier.
Which I won at Telford.
You won that Telford when it must have been about 10 years or so ago when that first was released. The prototype, the stereo that we released, not released, but we will produce a stereo before we go to tooling. The wing boom was too short, I think. And it was only when we got the stereo we looked at it and was like, what's going on here? Now, every book about the Sea Vixen at the time, everyone that had measured the prototype Sea Vixen, not the one that went out and flew, final production. So we were lucky enough with our kit at that stage that we were able to change the design. But of course, as soon as we released that kit to market, everyone went, oh, that's wrong.
And if you'd started it on
it is and it isn't.
If you'd started on the Sea Vixen at Duxford, its nose leg is buckled under anyway, and yet it looks that's how it's supposed to be. But it's not. It's kind of kneeling down on its nose. It's bent.
So we have to be so careful. And Luke, you met Luke earlier. He wanted to come down and have a little chat. That's why his job is so important.
Yeah.
We're really fortunate to have him because, it's not just buy a couple of books and take the detail in those as gospel. And of course, when you start looking at Spitfires changed so much.
Yeah.
Even the same Spitfire changed so much
during
its life.
Yeah.
And then when they were converted to, obviously the Mark 9 came before the Mark 8. So, even then, which plays havoc when we start choosing schemes for aircraft as well, because we're very fortunate with the Mark 9 24 scale Spitfire that the decals included. We've added extra parts to the decal sheet so you can model that serial number Spitfire through its life.
Right, that's a good idea.
So pre Johnny Johnson, pre D-Day, and then afterwards. So not very often we get the opportunity to do that with a kit, or because the aircraft, of course, didn't always survive the war or whatever. So
in most cases.
so to be able to do that is quite special. But I can just see your face when we was walking through all the tooling and you started picking the names off the side of them and the Hurricane Mark IV. You instantly spotted it. And
I know. Well, I remembered that. I mean, in fact, funnily enough, finding these old catalogues and flicking through them reminded me of some of those old Airfix kits. So it was really funny because I had that Hurricane and it always puzzled me. What is a Hurricane Mark IV? There were really only two marks.
Yes, yeah.
But in fact, there was also a Mark X, which was a Canadian-built one. So, it's no wonder, people make mistakes when they're tooling up for kits because some of the stuff, even from back then, wasn't clear. So what was a Hurricane Mark IV? It was just a Mark II, but probably with a slightly better engine.
It's the fact that those tools are the source. It's the source of the Nile.
They are the original.
That's where it all came from. It's from that little metal box.
Yep.
That all of those kits came. That for me just blows my mind.
They are the original tools, and as I said
I might have to smuggle one out.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Special bag. Yeah,
you need a special crane. They are the original tools, and we're never going to make those again. That's if we decide to do as we've done with the Lancaster, just taking it back onto subject. We've had a Lancaster in the Airfix range forever, pretty much. We're never going to make a new tool using the original drawings of that tool. We're going to put it in CAD. We're going to use modern technology to produce it, and that's what happens with a lot of our kits. you know, the Lancaster, the Spitfires,
Well, like
the Hurricanes.
hovercraft. To see the hovercraft, the tour for the hovercraft,
Yeah.
just blows my mind.
Loads of spoilers now.
Just-
Everyone knows what's sat in our warehouse, but
Well, I presume they're all in there.
yeah.
I'll just name a few more planes, you know.
But yeah, I mean, it's the Lightning, you know, the original tooled Lightning here, and then we've produced the new tool. So we never produced this one again. If the tooling, I believe it still exists, it's most probably with our suppliers.
And
now.
also, isn't it great how size of box? You know, you would never in the world, for any manufacturer, have a 1/72 Lightning in a box that size. You wouldn't get the nose wheel in that now.
No, I
It's so
did think
small.
this earlier. But the tool layouts are very different to what they used to be. So this is what you'd call a tree sprue. So my designers tell me. So the plastic is injected in the centre, and then everything goes out like a tree. And it's essentially, it was a cheaper way of producing the kit. You use less plastic because you don't need all the plastic around the outside. It can present problems, but you might not get an even feed to the cavities, which is why our boxes are now are larger than this, because for our classic kits, we have that frame, that
the
outer frame,
yeah, I noticed
because that
yeah.
evenly disperses the plastic as part of
Is
the
that what it
production
is?
process.
Oh, okay.
What we have started to do with some of our starter sets, though, is to try and keep that cost down and make our starter sets more accessible, price point wise. Is we're going back to tree,
Right, how
some of the trees. So
Well, a bit like Trevor was just commenting on the size of the box there. You know, one of the things I remember about buying your Airfix kits was the size. Obviously, the size of the box dictated how much you were going to pay for it, and it was multiples of your weekly pocket money.
Yeah.
So if I got, I can't remember, say 25p a week pocket money, it might take me 4 weeks to save up for, I can't even remember how much the Lancaster cost, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that to save up for that. The Sunderland, which was in an even bigger box.
Oh, you wouldn't get a Sunderland.
I did eventually buy a Sunderland,
No.
Sunderland, and I think that probably took me about 8 weeks
Yeah,
to save up
Sunderland.
for, and quite a lot of car washing as well.
Yeah.
our pricing is still done on series, which governs the size of the boxes, and you know I don't really want to change that actually, because it's so nostalgic as well. But yeah, fantastic, brilliant. And of course, also packing this, because that's been clipped off the sprue. You know, it's not, we can't mould it like that. So there's a lot of manual labour in this, the way it's been done. But no, fascinating. Thank you so much for bringing those items in today,
Not at all.
because
Thank
I
you.
really didn't expect it. But
Thank you for asking
a
us.
little
here.
bit of it's been a pleasure. I guess one last thing before we say goodbye is when the film is going to be available. So
Well, May the 27th is what we call the theatrical release. So that'll be when it's available in cinemas. And I think the digital release is happening on the same day. And then Blu-rays and DVDs for old-fashioned
I remember
times.
them. I remember them.
That starts on the following Monday. So whatever that date is,
30th, I've
30th.
got
Yeah.
here,
Yeah, but I mean, go and see it in the cinema. It's a big airplane. It's a big screen story.
yeah.
And you have an opportunity to go and see it at RAF Hendon or at RAF Duxford.
Yes.
We're having special screenings as well.
Yeah, so Imperial War Museum, Duxford have got a special screening on a particular Saturday. I can't remember.
25th of June.
25th. There you are. And Hendon are doing
Hendon's
the same on the same day.
Yeah.
So we might have a couple of guys at each of one of those. So come along. If I know it's on the Duxford website now. You can go and buy a ticket, and you get access to the whole museum as well as watching the film.
And you get to talk to us about kits.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
be there.
Well, both places.
Yeah. We've got on fast motorbikes and stuff.
We've made
Helicopters.
model kits of ourselves.
There you
And
are.
duplicated ourselves to be in two places at once.
Done a
We'll
James
be,
May,
we'll be
though.
promised to be at both events, answering questions.
Well, that'd be perfect. I mean, that's worth I think it's £40 to get into Duxford to meet you guys, feel and experience the film, because you know the sound, the audio is going to be something else as well.
And in the presence of two real Lancasters.
That's right. One of which you'll be able to climb in. So
yes,
it's all part of the deal of the day.
And there'll be veterans there as well. Most important.
loads of stuff.
Far more important than me and David will be. There will be veterans present among us, which will make it very special.
Yeah,
You know.
very. Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for
Thank you.
coming in
Thank you.
today.
It's been a real thrill.
It has, and please go and watch the film. Visit our social media channels. There's loads of little clips of the film on there, and then get it on DVD and support the film as much as we can. One last thing. What's next after Lancaster? Because
Do you know,
5
it's the
years,
most commonly asked question.
5 years.
The
for Spitfire,
most commonly
5
asked question about our film. Before I even get a chance to say, "Did you like the film?" People will say, "And what's the next film then?" You know, without us telling them it. That's what took 5 years.
Another Merlin engine.
It is. Well, we've done one. We've done 4. So
Merlin
there's gotta be
trilogy.
2, so there's got to be the Mosquito.
Merlin trilogy.
Yeah. So comment in the section below for
Unless
what you
it's a
think.
3-engined Merlin plane. Doesn't come to
There
mind.
was only one on a wing and a prayer. I think just
Yeah.
like.
Well, true, yeah.
just like
Yeah, just
King
George.
George.
Yeah, George is a 3-engine Merlin. 3
How
Merlin,
that
yeah,
made it
that's
back
right.
on, never know.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
No.
don't forget to like the video if you've liked it. I'm sure you have. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and and comment below and go and watch the film. And thank you so much, guys,
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
coming in.
It's been great fun.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.